Hello everyone. In today's demonstration, we're going to be showing you the new asset management project template that's available in the version 14 release of our Simple GIS client product. This is a pretty interesting project template in that it guides the user through creating some shapefile layers for modeling their physical assets on the map, guiding them through creating the attribute data that's going to describe their assets, as well as allowing them to build related tables to store maintenance records and inspection records, in addition to setting up maintenance cycles and inspection cycles for forecasting when maintenance items may be due or inspections may be due on certain classes of equipment. So I think this is a pretty interesting project template, and we'll get, as we go through this demonstration, hopefully this will become a little bit more clearer. But to begin with, I've just launched Simple GIS, and of course to create a new project template, what you would need to do is go to your new project screen, and what you're going to see here is the list of available project templates that you can use to create a new project. And so the template that we're going to be discussing today is located, it's the second one from the end here. It's the asset management project, and if you click on its icon you can get the detailed description here. But to create a new project in Simple GIS based upon this template, you're going to simply double click on its icon, and then you'll see Simple GIS create a new empty project with a default map view document that's currently empty. And you'll get a dialog box allowing you to select one of the pre-configured base maps if you'd like to load that into your map document. All of these pre-configured base maps that's displayed here are just some that has been compiled by Simple GIS. Most of these are based on freely available web mapping services. Some of them are based upon local data that's installed with your Simple GIS client installation. And of course, you're not obligated to use any of these. You can simply click cancel. And as always, in any Simple GIS client project, in its map data view document, you can add, as many layers as you'd like. So if there's other web mapping services that you have a URL to that you'd like to add as a base map, or even local data that you have on your machine, you can add as additional layers into your map. But for today's demonstration, we're going to use this OpenStreetMap, which is the web mapping service available from the OpenStreetMap organization. And so to select it, I'm just going to double click on its tile here. And as I do, I see that it did add a new layer to my map, and it displays that layer in the background of my map here. In addition, I've got a new dialog box that's come up, which is the actual wizard for the asset project management template. And it's this wizard that's going to guide us step by step through the process of creating our new shapefiles for modeling our asset data. So the first step is, in this dialog box, you'll see a button here that simply says create new asset layer. So obviously that's the first step. And as we click on this button, we'll get another dialog box that'll guide us step by step through the process of creating our new layer. The very first step we have is to specify the file name for our new shapefile. And for those that may not be familiar, a shapefile is an industry standard GIS format, stores both geometry data and attribute data. And so to begin, we're going to click on this button here that says click here to select file name for asset layer. When we do this, we'll get a file selection dialog box. And in this file selection dialog box, we can navigate to the folder where we want to create our new layer. And if we want it to overwrite an existing layer, we could just double click on one of these file names to overwrite it. The purpose of today's demonstration, we're just going to create a new empty layer to start with. And for today's demonstration, we're actually going to be modeling fire hydrants. And so I'm just going to type in a new file name for our layer here, and then I'll click save. And as I do, I see that it has populated the full path and file name for our new shapefile. And at this point, I can simply click the next button, and proceed to the next step. And this next step is we need to select the geometry for our shapefile. Now, shapefiles, again, if you're not familiar, they can store multiple features, thousands or even millions of records in some cases, but it's all of the features. The one thing with the shapefile, all the features have to have the same geometry type. So they can have many features, but all the features will have the same geometry type. So when you're creating your shapefile, you have to specify the type of geometry you're going to use to model your asset. So your three options here are point, which are just single points on the surface of the earth. And these are good if your asset are features that can easily be modeled as points on the surface of the earth. So, for example, the one that we're using today is fire hydrants, fits that category. It's easily shown as a single point on our map. Other examples might be poles or manholes, features of that nature. The other geometry we can select is Polyline, which this is really good for modeling linear features. So examples of this might be pipelines, could be water lines, highways, railways. And then finally we have Polygon. And again, this particular geometry is good for modeling assets that occupy a enclosed space on the surface of the earth that has an area associated to it. So examples would be building footprints. So if your assets were buildings, you might want to use a polygon and actually map out the footprint of your building. So that could be an option. The other things might be land tracts or parcels. So that could be more suitable for polygon type geometry. But since we're doing fire hydrants today, I'm going to leave it selected to point. Now the next question we need to answer is, do I want to keep historical records for maintenance performed on our assets, as well as do I want to keep records of inspections performed on the asset? And so you can select both of these if you want, only one of them if you'd like, or neither. In our case today, we're going to select both. And as I check both of these boxes, I see a couple of the options pop up here. And the first option says, since I selected the maintenance, that I want to keep historical records for maintenance, it's prompting me to ask, will assets have the same maintenance cycle? And so the cycle is just how frequently the maintenance is scheduled. So I could have a maintenance cycle of like 60 days, for example, which means maintenance will be performed every 60 days. So you can have all of the assets have this in the particular layer that we're creating, have the same maintenance cycle, and the same holds true for the inspection cycle. Or if I wanted to, I could have different maintenance cycles for individual features. And so it's just prompting me to ask what type of cycles for maintenance and inspection that I want to specify, because if the features are going to have different cycles for maintenance or inspections, there will be a special field added to your shapefile where you can specify that cycle on a per feature basis. If they all have the same maintenance cycle, then there's no need for that field, and it's configured in the program to know that all of the features in that particular layer have a set maintenance or inspection cycle. So in today's demonstration, again, I'm going to leave this selected to yes, and we're going to use the same maintenance cycle for all the features, and we're going to have the same inspection cycle for all the features. So once you've answered these prompts, you've selected your geometry and indicated whether you want to keep maintenance and inspection and the type of cycles that you want to establish for your assets, you'll click the next button. And now you'll be brought to the page where you can actually define the attribute data to describe your asset. So one thing you might notice is the dialog at this point is kind of broken into two separate areas. You have a grid view on the top half of your dialog, and this represents fields that are mandatory for your shapefile. So to do this modeling, there are certain fields that are required, and you cannot edit these fields. So for example, FID is a unique ID for each feature in your shapefile. And then you have a last maintenance, and this is a date field that indicates when maintenance was last done on the asset. Then you have a maintenance due field, which indicates when the next maintenance is due on a particular asset. And then since we indicated that we wanted to keep both maintenance and inspection records, we have the same thing for inspection. We have inspection, last inspection date, and we also have an inspection due date. Now the fields in the lower half of the screen are fields that can be edited, and they're user definable, so you can modify these fields if you'd like. You can add additional fields to describe your asset, or you can remove any of these fields that you would not like to add. Now there are several different special field types that Simple GIS defines for your shapefile layers, and if you look real closely at this first field in our grid here in the lower half, it's called the condition field. And this field is intended to describe the condition of the asset. And you'll notice that the field type is set to lookup. And what that means is as you edit attribute data for this particular, any particular asset in this shapefile, when the attribute data form comes up, the condition will actually be a drop-down list, and you'll be able to select from some predefined values that you want to use to indicate the condition of the asset. So if you wanted to, you could double-click on this field, and you would see that here in the shapefile field definition. So here we have the field name, which is just simply condition, and by nature a shapefile is limited to field names of no more than 11 characters in width. The field width identifies the width of the field in terms of how many characters it can hold. And then we also have this field alias field. So since the field name is limited to 11 characters, this field alias allows you to give a more descriptive name for the field. And the field alias will actually be used as labels on the attribute data forms when you're viewing the attribute data for your assets, as well as any table views, so that you can have a more descriptive label for that field rather than just the short field name. If your table is going to have many records, and there's a field that you're going to be doing a lot of querying or searching on, then it may make sense to create a database index on that field, which is what this checkbox is intended to do. If you check this box, it'll actually create a attribute index on that field that can help in your performance on performing queries on that field. And really this is only needed if this is going to be a really big table and you're going to be doing a lot of querying on that particular field. Here below is where you define the field type. So you can see all the various field types that you can define, anywhere from a string, just a pure string value, to a number value like an integer or a real, which is like a decimal number, Boolean values, which is simply yes, no, true, false type fields. Then we have date fields, and then we have date time fields, which includes a time in addition to the date. And then we have what we had selected for this particular field as lookup values. And as you check a field as a lookup value, you'll get an edit box here where you can list valid values that you want to appear in the drop-down list for this particular field when users are editing the data. And then we also have what we call a linked document file. So you can actually link in other documents. This can be any type of document. This could be Excel spreadsheets, PDF files. So this could be useful if you're wanting to link in user manuals, maintenance instructions, anything like that. You can link in to your feature. There's also fields for storing photos. So there's a photo, which is just a single photo. You can use this, and then the photo will show as a thumbnail in the attribute data form when you're viewing the attribute data for a particular asset. And then we also have one called Photo Album, which allows you to store multiple photos for a single feature. And again, these will show as thumbnails when you're viewing the attribute data. And we'll see this illustrated here in a little bit as we progress through this demonstration. So I'm going to cancel this for now. So you can edit Any of these fields, you see by default, some of the fields it added was the condition, which is a lookup values. It added a link document field in case you wanted to link any documents to your assets, and then a photo album field if you wanted to include photos with your assets. So you can edit these existing fields by simply double clicking on them. You could remove one of these fields if you didn't feel like you needed it just by selecting the field here in the grid and clicking on this Remove Selected Field button. Or you can add additional fields by clicking on this Add Field button. So for example, for our hydrants, we might add a field here, and we're going to call it base size for the field name, and we're just going to make it 5 characters wide, and we're going to give it field alias of base size. And then for the field type, we're going to make it a lookup value, and we're just going to put in some values here that's going to appear in the drop down list for the different base sizes for our hydrants. So we have a 4, a 6, or an 8. And I'll click apply, and as I do, I see that it added this field now into our grid. Then, since we indicated that all the features in our shapefile is going to have the same maintenance cycle and they're going to have the same inspection cycle, we need to enter in the duration for these cycles. So this represents the number of days between maintenance that's done on the asset, and same thing with inspection. It indicates the number of days between when inspections are done on the asset. So let's say for our maintenance, maybe we have a cycle of every, basically an annual cycle, so every 365 days. And then for our inspections, just for this demonstration, we'll set that to 30 days. So we'll say we have an inspection, then we have to do an inspection on the asset every 30 days. Now we'll click the next button to proceed to our next step. And since we indicated that we wanted to keep maintenance data on our asset, our next step is going to be to define the table that's going to hold all of our maintenance records. And so this is going to be an associated table to the shapefile, and this table is going to be related to the shapefile because you can have multiple maintenance records. So this is like your maintenance log or history of maintenance. So you'll have multiple records in this table for a single feature in your shapefile for your fire hydrant. So a single fire hydrant will have a log of multiple maintenance that was done that's represented as multiple records in this maintenance log table. And it's very similar to how we defined the attribute data for our shapefile. We're defining fields for our maintenance log table, and it's broken into 2 parts. We have the first part in the upper half of the dialog, which are fields that cannot be edited, that are mandatory fields. And this includes a record ID, which is a unique identifier for each record in your table. Then we have the feature ID, which is the ID of the feature that each record is related to in the table. And then we have a performance date, which is this is the date that the maintenance was actually done on the asset. And so that is here as well. And again, none of these, if I double click on them or try and do anything, they cannot be edited. This is just to show you what the mandatory fields are. Below that are your user defined fields. So these are fields that you can modify, and they are really up to the user on what data you want to keep for your maintenance records. You can modify these fields if you'd like. You can remove fields if you'd like, and you can even add additional fields. So you see some of the fields we have. We have a performed by field, which is supposed to indicate the person that actually performed the maintenance, and it's a lookup field type. One thing you may notice though is the lookup values are empty in this case, and that's one thing with the lookup list. So if I double click on this and I look at this field definition, this field is in fact the lookup values are empty. And so if you have a list of technicians, for instance, you can populate their names in this list. But the thing with lookup fields, if there is a value that's not currently in the list, as a user edits the data, they can type in a new value and it will add it as a item in the lookup list. And so if you were intending this to be technicians, as technicians edit this data, they could type in their name and it would populate in the list, and then it would appear in the drop down the next time. And so that's just a small caveat with lookup fields. So I'm going to cancel out of this. You see some of the other fields that's been added kind of as a default. We have a maintenance type, which again is another lookup, and it has a couple of values in it just to indicate the type of maintenance done. In this case, we have preventative or reactive. Of course, you can edit that if you'd like it to say something else or add additional values. And then we have a linked document. So this linked document may be useful to include any information from another document that's related to the maintenance. This could even be, for instance, like a video of something that was performed during the maintenance. So you can certainly do that. Then we have a photos field. Again, this is a photo album. If you had a set of photos to document anything in the maintenance, you could also add that in if you'd like. Of course, if you don't want these, you can simply select them and click the Remove Selected field. And then lastly, we have a Notes field by default, which is just for any free-form notes that maybe the person performing the maintenance would want to enter in about the asset. Again, this is all completely modifiable by the user. And again, they can add any additional fields they may need as well. So once they're kind of satisfied with the attribute fields for their maintenance log, they would click the Next button. And again, since we indicated that we also want to keep inspection records on the asset, now it brings you to a dialog where you can modify the attribute fields related to inspections done on the asset. Again, same exact thing where the upper half of the screen are fields that are mandatory fields that can't be edited. The lower half are user-defined fields, and the user has complete flexibility to edit these fields, add to them, remove them, whatever they need to do. Now, once we've gone through that, when we click the Next button, the last action we have is simply to create our new layer. And so in this next screen, it's pretty obvious here, we just come to our Create New Layer button. We'll click on that, and it'll actually generate our new shapefile. And then we may get a confirmation or a question box here that says, do we have data and other data sets that we want to import to our new layer? So if your new layer is a point shapefile, for instance, our assets remodeling is a point shapefile. If you had an Excel spreadsheet or CSV file that contained a latitude, longitude column for your asset, so maybe you had rows of data for each asset already that you were keeping in the spreadsheet or CSV file, and you had an associated latitude, longitude coordinate of where that asset was located on the earth, you could import that data into your new layer if you'd like. Or if you had another shapefile, maybe you had created a shapefile previously where you were mapping your asset data, and now you wanted to import that data into your new layer that you just created for your asset, you could do that as well. So if you do have other data, you would simply select Yes if you wanted to import data. So at this point, for today's demonstration, I did create just a sample spreadsheet. So I have a spreadsheet file here, and I'll just open that up right quick. And you can see it's a very simple spreadsheet, but all I had was a set of column headings here. So I have assumed that each row was a separate fire hydrant, and I had a base size to indicate the base size, and then I had a condition column heading, and then I had some dates here for when it was last inspected and when the last maintenance was performed on the data. And then, as you can see, I have an associated latitude, longitude coordinate of where these features are located at. So I'm going to import this spreadsheet data into our new shapefile. Of course, if you don't have this data, you certainly don't have to import it. This is just if you already had some data that you wanted to import to pre-populate your new shapefile. So I'm going to come back to the dialog box we had open in Simple GIS, which is this import layer dialog. And I'm going to select the file that I want to import. So I click on this select file to import button. And as I do, I get a file selection dialog box. So I would just go to the folder location where my data is at that I'm wanting to import. And in this case, I'm going to select this Excel spreadsheet I have here that's just called My Hydrant, which is what you're seeing here in the background. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to just double click on that file name. And as I select it, because it is an Excel spreadsheet, so you'll get this anytime you select an Excel spreadsheet or a CSV file. It's just asking you, does the first row contain field names? And so really what it's wanting to know is, does your spreadsheet, your columns have column headings? Which if you look in our data here, we do. We have a base size, a condition, and then we have last inspection, last maintenance. And so I'm going to select yes. And now I just need to tell Simple GIS which field contains a longitude coordinate, and then which field or column contains the latitude coordinate. So is looking at this, I have a column heading called long, which contains the longitude. And I have a column heading called lat, which contains the latitude. And I'll click apply. And as I do that, I see that it brought in and lists all of the fields that's available in the Excel spreadsheet. In addition, over here under the field mappings, I notice that it already added a field mapping. And the field mapping is saying, you know, it takes whatever the column heading or field is in your source data set and what field that you want that data to be put into your new shapefile. If it finds an exact match on field name, it'll go ahead and add it in as a field mapping. And so in this case, our new shapefile has a field called condition or name condition, and our Excel spreadsheet had a column heading name condition. So it went ahead and added that to the field mapping. Now these other remaining fields are fields that it did not find an exact match for, but we can still map that data to a specific field in our new shapefile. And to do that, we would select the column heading or field from our source. So this is coming from our Excel spreadsheet. So we had that column heading called base size. And then we would select the field in our new shapefile that we want to put this data into. So I want to select from the drop-down list. And if I didn't have a field that I wanted to add this data into, I could add it as a new field into my shapefile. So I could append it as a new field in my shapefile. So when I first click on this drop-down box, you see this append as new field. That would actually allow you to append this as a new field into your shapefile. But in this case, in our shapefile that we just created, we had added a field called base_SZ, which is going to contain the base size. So I'm going to add that, and so I'm going to map this data from this column in my spreadsheet to this field in our shapefile. So I've selected that. Now I'm just going to click this add mapping, and I see that it's added it to my mapping list here. In addition, it has now removed that source, that base size source from my source fields here because it's already been mapped. Now I also have this last inspection column. It truncates any column names longer than 11 characters off, but we know that this was the column in my spreadsheet, this last inspection, and I want to map that to this last inspection field in our shapefile. So I'm going to add that, and then I got the same thing for the last maintenance. So I'm going to map that to this last maintenance field. And now I'm simply going to click the import data button, and it's going to add a new layer to my map. And if I move this dialog box out of the way, you see I have some points here, and we'll zoom in a minute to those points to get a better look at them. But Your asset project template wizard remains up. So this just allows you, if you wanted to create another asset layer, you could just click on this, create new asset layer, to repeat the process. Once you're done adding or creating any layers that you wanted, you would just simply click the finish button to dismiss this dialog box. And now if I was to select my new hydrant layer that it added, so I see that it's the active layer because it's highlighted in green here. And then if I click on the zoom to layer button, it's going to zoom to the extent of my layer, and I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I'm just going to scroll back on my mouse wheel. And I see I have a set of 4 points here. If you notice, there's one right here that's red. I have one here that's blue, another here that's blue, and then I have one over here that's a purple color. And so this is based upon the legend that it assigned to my new layer. And I'm going to make my table of contents here, my map data view document, a little wider. So I'm just going to position my mouse here on the edge of my table of contents till I see this, my mouse change to this splitter icon, and I'm just going to click and drag to make my table of contents a little wider. So now I can see what these different symbols mean in my legend. And so what it did, it added some different categories here in my legend. Anything in red is inspections that are past due. Anything in purple are inspections coming due in the next 15 days. And then anything in blue are inspections not due within the next 15 days. So this is just created on inspections. You could do something very similar for your maintenance if you'd rather do it on that. You can just modify this legend, which you can view some of the other documentation and tutorials to see how you can modify legends in Simple GIS. But it takes the inspection cycle we have specified. So we have specified a 30-day inspection cycle. And so it just took half of that to indicate inspections that's coming due in the next 15 days. And then anything in blue would be anything out beyond 15 days. If I wanted to view the attribute data for any of these features, again, just with my hydrants as my active layer, I would click on the View Feature Data tool, and I would click at the base of one of these points, and it's going to bring up the attribute dialog. And now I see that I have all of the data that we defined for these particular features. So I have the last maintenance performed on. Again, this was imported from our Excel spreadsheet. And then I see the next maintenance due on it. Automatically populated this based upon the last maintenance date. So we had set a 365-day maintenance cycle. So it automatically populated the next maintenance due on 1 year from when the last maintenance was performed. Same thing with inspection date. It populated the last inspection date that it imported from our spreadsheet, and the next inspection due on it incremented it by 30 days because that was the cycle we had set. We can see the condition was coded as good. I don't have any linked document or photos on this right now. I can see that the base size for this particular hydrant was 4. And these are the number of days remaining until the next inspection is due, which we see as a negative because it's past due, and days until the next maintenance is due. This table here would be the record of all inspections performed on the asset, which we currently have none. And then this table below would be the record of all the maintenance that was done on the asset, which again, we'd have none at this point in time. Now, if I wanted to update any of this asset data, I could right-click on my layer, and I can select Toggle Layer Edit. And as I do, I see that the X that's next to the layer name changed from a black X to a red X, indicating that I can now edit this. And so now I can edit attribute data for an existing feature by clicking on the View Feature Data tool again and clicking at the base of the point. And now certain of these fields are now editable. Now the last maintenance and last inspection dates are not editable because it defines these fields as being auto-populated based upon values and other fields. And so you'll see that happen in a second as we update this information. But for instance, our condition code, we can modify that, and now I see I have a drop-down list because this was defined as a lookup value, and I can change the condition of this asset by selecting from the list. I can add a linked document here. I can do so. I now see that I have this button with the folder icon. If I click on this, it brings up a file selection dialog box where I can actually select a file that I want to link in to this particular asset. So it could be any file that I want it to select. So I don't have anything right now that I want to particularly link into this particular asset, but just knowing that you would just simply select that file and it would add it as a hyperlink here that you could then click on to launch that document, whatever it may be. And then I can also add photos to my asset. If I was running this on a tablet device that was running a Windows operating system, and I was running Simple GIS on this, and I opened this up, and let's say that tablet or even a laptop had a built-in camera, I could click on this button with the camera button to activate that camera and actually take photos while in the field. Or if I had photos stored somewhere on my hard drive or network drive, I could click this button with the folder icon to select the photos that I want to add in to this asset. So as I click on the folder icon button, I'll get this dialog box where I can manage photos, and I can add or remove photos. To add a photo, I simply click on the Add Photo button. I navigate to the folder containing my photos, and then I select the photo that I'm wanting to add. So as I select a photo, I see that it adds it as a thumbnail. To remove a photo, I simply click on it and select Remove Selected Photo. And so then you get a confirmation, do you want to delete all selected photos? And I'll say yes, and then it will remove it. But I can always go back and add it back in or add additional photos. So I'm going to add this one we just selected back in. So this could be like a drawings or illustrations of the asset. It could be actual pictures of the asset if you actually wanted to add in a photo. And then once I'm done, I simply click Close Form, and I see that it's added it in as thumbnails here into my dialog box. Now, since I'm editing, I can launch any of these by holding the Control key down and double clicking. If I'm not in edit mode, I can just simply double click on the thumbnail. And if you hover over an image, you'll get the pop-up help that indicates. So if I hold my Control key down, double click, I'll bring up a full-size preview of that drawing or photo. And so that's just a convenient way to store photos of information like that. Same thing with a linked document. Here I have my base size drop down box. You remember I defined that as a drop down as well, or lookup values. So I could change that if I needed to. And if I wanted to record an inspection or maintenance event for this asset, I now notice above my tables I have this plus button and a minus button. And this allows me to add records or remove records from my associated tables. So I could add an inspection record by clicking the plus button, and I get a new pop-up attribute data form where I can enter in information about the inspection. Now my inspected on date defaults to today's date, but if I click on this, I see it's just a calendar control, so I can select whatever actual date that the inspection occurred. I'll leave it set to today's date. And now I have my inspected by. Now it's a lookup field, but again, I don't have any list values in it because we didn't define any when we created our layer. But if I have certain technicians in the field, they can simply type in their name, and as they type it in and they move away from the field, it's going to come up with a pop-up saying the value entered does not match a value in the list. Do you want to edit the lookup list? And here I can edit the lookup list. So if I actually wanted this to be a value in the lookup list, I just simply click apply. And now it would be a part of the drop down for anybody that was editing that asset feature. I have an inspection result I can add as well. Again, I can add linked documents, so this might be a good place if you had a video of a particular inspection you were doing. You could attach that, or any other type of document that you needed. Same thing as before when we did it on the main asset record. We can attach photos, so I can add photos of maybe what went on during the inspection, and then I can add any notes that I wanted to here below. And I can click OK. And one thing to notice, when I did that, it added a record here. So here is the inspection information. Again, you won't see like linked documents and photos. You won't actually see the thumbnails in this case. You just have the record. But if you wanted to go back and view the details of any particular record in one of these tables, you just simply double click on the record, and then you'll get this pop-up box with the information in it again. So at this point in time, the other thing to notice is I changed, for this particular record I added inspected on, which was March 18th of 2022. I don't know if you noticed, but if you look up here now, on the last inspection date, you see that it actually updated now to March 18th of 2022. In addition to that, it automatically incremented the next inspection due on April 17th. So 30 days from this date, it automatically incremented and updated that. It hasn't updated the days until inspection due yet. This is another calculated field that is added. But after we close this dialog box, it will recalculate and update this, and which you'll see here in a second. So we'll go ahead and click OK for now. And one thing I want you to notice is if we look at our records here, our legend, it's still indicating that it's past due, but just simply because the map hasn't refreshed. All I got to do is pan or do anything on the map to cause it to refresh. And I now see that this marker changed to blue, indicating the inspection is not due within the next 15 days. And in fact, if I was to pull the attribute data for that feature back up using the View Feature Data tool, as I click on it, I now see that days until inspection due is now out to 29.5 days. So I'm going to go ahead and turn editing off by right-clicking on the layer and say toggle layer edit again, which is just going to toggle editing and just toggles it either on or off. So I now see the red X went from a red X to a black X, indicating that I'm not editing. One thing I do want to point out is that while the asset management project template guides you through the process of creating these asset layers, you can create these type of layers from any simple GIS client project. If you look underneath the layer management tool set, which is the upper tool button in the upper left corner of your map data view document, there's a drop down arrow. If you click on that and you look at the drop downs, one of the options you'll see there is create new asset layer. So you can click on that at any time, and you'll get that same dialog box that'll pop up that'll guide you and walk you through the steps of creating a new layer for recording this type of information. You can also find this underneath the layer edit drop down menu at the top of your map view document. So if you click on that and look at the list of drop down layers, about not quite midway down, you'll see there's a create new asset layer menu item again. The other thing that you can do is you can actually generate reports off of this data. So for instance, if I come here to the reporting menu, so I have a reports drop down menu, and if I wanted to run an inspection log report, this would just give me a report of all the inspections that was done on a particular asset. So if I wanted a history of that, I could select this, and it's going to give me a list of layers in my current map view document that are shapefile layers, or what we would call vector layers that contains attribute data. You would select the layer that you're wanting to report on, and you could either show all inspection log data for a particular feature or only show inspections since a specified date. So just depending on what you select. Next, you would select the features that you want to report on. So you can select features from the map, or you can run a query to select features. I'm just going to select features from the map. So the way I would do that is telling you is just simply click and drag a box to surround the features that you're wanting to report on. You see the color of the feature changes, and it's unfortunate because my selection color I had set in this particular view is red, which matches one of my legend symbols. So I would probably in real world practice want to change my selection color of my view to be something other than red, since my legend is also set to red. But in this case, for the purposes of this demonstration, we'll take this one feature that we've selected, and now we'll come and select Run Report. And this will actually generate a new Excel spreadsheet report. And I'm just going to call it my inspection log and just give it a new file name. Click Save. It'll generate the report, and then it'll open it up in Excel. And this is what the report looks like. So it gives it for each feature that's selected. It'll give the attribute information for that feature. It won't give you any of the thumbnails as far as photos or anything like that, since you know, it probably isn't the best in a report format. Not the best viewing format for that, but it will give you any of the other attribute data information, like the condition code, when it was last inspected, when last maintenance occurred, what have you. And then it'll list underneath that all the record of inspections that were done on that particular feature. So if you had a multiple historical list of inspections done, you would see all of those inspections. And you can do the same thing for maintenance records. So let me close that. And you can also run a report of upcoming inspections due or upcoming maintenance due. So I would come back to my reports drop-down menu, and I can run an inspection schedule report. And very similar, I select the layer that I'm wanting to report on, and then I just select the time frame that I want to see all inspections due in the next however many days. So I wanted it set out to 365 days. I could set it out to 60 days. Anything, just type in a value here, how far out you want to look, and click Run Report. Give it a name for your report. Again, this is going to be an Excel spreadsheet. And as you click Save, it'll actually run that report and then open it up in Excel for you. And you see that it'll give you the run date of the report, and then here is the actual upcoming inspections listed in chronological order. So I see I have this actual feature here that's coming up first on March 23rd, followed by an inspection on this particular feature on March 5th, then one on March 10th, one on March 17th. So this is all of the attribute data that's putting out. So if you had a street address or something associated with it, you could, if that was an attribute field that you had created in your shapefile, that would show as well, or any other descriptive data about the particular asset. So that is the asset management project template. Hopefully this was useful for you. I think it's a nice new addition to Simple GIS Client to help walk users through setting this up, and has a lot of potential and a lot of power associated with it. Please, if you'd like more information, I just encourage you to visit the website. All one word, it's simplegissoftware.com. That URL is also included in the description of this video. And again, if this was useful, I encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you'll see more videos demonstrating some of the functionality in Simple GIS Client. Thank you for your time. I hope you have a good day.